$50 made the difference between seeing the big Eiffel Tower or sent to Sweden in body bags piece by piece. People ask Reddit, what's your dodge the bullet story? When I was a dumb young woman, I lived in St. Thomas, Virgin Islands. I worked in an area that could be very sketchy after dark. One night after work I got really drunk. I stumbled into a taxi to head home. So drunk I'm not even sure how I gave him my address. When we arrived I started digging in my pocket for cash to pay the taxi driver, and he reached over and said, No baby. I'm not a taxi. I just wanted to make sure you got home okay. Apparently I had just jumped into a random car. I will be forever grateful to this stranger and much more careful in my after work decisions. Reply: I was this person for somebody once, not for anyone in the Virgin Islands, but in the town I went to college. I was heading out to pick up a friend from work late on a Friday when this girl staggered into the street in front of me, waving her arms. So drunk I'm not even sure how I gave him my address. When we arrived I started digging in my pocket for cash to pay the taxi driver, and he reached over and said, No baby. I'm not a taxi. I just wanted to make sure you got home okay. Apparently I had just jumped into a random car. I will be forever grateful to this stranger and much more careful in my after work decisions. When I was 10, I had a friend who had a boys and girls club adult mentor. My friend invited me to come meet him, and I was immediately creeped out. The way the dude smiled at me still gives me nightmares. 2 days later, a local news story identified him as a child molester, and he had been molesting my friend for 2 years at that point. I will always trust my gut when it says get the duck out of here. Had gallstones and the doctor gave me a choice between surgery to remove the gallbladder or antibiotics. I choose the surgery, which is very unlike me. When they started the surgery they found out the gallbladder had burst and the stones were in my body cavity. What was supposed to be a short procedure through the belly button turned into a 10 inches incision to remove the stones. I was supposed to leave the hospital that day, but it turned into a week. However, if I chose antibiotics and went home with a burst gallbladder, I probably would have died of sepsis. I was on my way to Taco Bell in the back of a friend's small truck. The cab was full, so I was in the bed. We passed by my apartment on the way and I chose to have him drop me off. It was a bit chilly in the open air back there. By the time I got into my apartment I had a Snapchat from the driver. It was a picture of his totaled truck. While he was stopped at an intersection, a drunk driver approached from the opposite direction going 100 plus. The driver clipped a bus causing an abrupt stop and his whole engine to rip out of his car, fly through the intersection and into my friend's truck where I had been riding, unseatbelted moments before. None of my friends were injured. I think both the people in the other car died. I was dating a girl for a while, and despite living and working on the opposite side of town, she'd always be near this one neighborhood coffee shop that I frequented, so I'd randomly run into her there and ask what brought her to that neck of the woods. She's usually reply grabbing some coffee, or I had a hunch she'd be here and wanted to say hi. One day she up and moves out of the state with zero warning, and tells me that we aren't dating anymore. I was confused, but it was casual, so while it sucked I just thought, oh, she probably had some family emergency or something and didn't want to tell me. A few weeks later on her Snapchat I see that she's just making absolute stacks in San Diego, and is always wearing the same uniform in these pictures. I was a bit confused but didn't think much of it. I started dating this other chick who frequented the aforementioned coffee shop, and after a month or two of dating, the first chick comes back and starts hanging out with her a bunch around the same neighborhood the coffee shop was in. A week later, both of them are moving to San Diego, and want me to come with them, live with them, and work where they work. Something just felt extremely fishy, so I said no, and off they went. Eventually a picture got posted with both of them in it, in front of a very strange but very instantly familiar building. The HQ of the Church of Scientology. The reason the original chick was always in that neighborhood is because kitty corner from the coffee shop was the local chapter of the Church of Scientology. She got pretty ingrained in the church, and moved to San Diego to work for them, then came back to recruit gullible people to come back with her. And that's the story of how I lost 2 girlfriends to the Church of Scientology, and was none the wiser. Definitely glad I dodged that bullet. If you want to support our new channel, please hit the like and subscribe button. We would also love to read some feedback in the comments. Thank you very much. I got into a car accident that seriously ducked me up. During the initial scans to see how dented up I was from the accident, they found a mass on my pancreas. Turns out I have PITs, endocrine tumors. It was just sitting there, getting bigger. I took a bullet to dodge a bullet. Was helping 2 other people cut down a tree with a chainsaw after a storm that knocked out power. We had to get specific trees down before the electric company would come out to fix the lines. The tree snapped and gave way above the chainsaw cut and kissed my lip. If I was standing an inch further, it would have been extremely painful. My father competed in the Boston Marathon the year of the bombing. Thankfully, he finished about 90 minutes before the explosion and we already away from the race. Me and my girlfriend at the time were traveling from New Zealand to my family back home in Sweden. We both decided to spend a bit more money to fly back to NZ through Paris instead of Amsterdam, just because we wanted to see the Eiffel Tower. It cost us maybe an extra $50 and we got to see it on the landing and then take off, but never actually set foot in Paris proper because we were poor students. When we landed in Auckland, New Zealand, jet lagged to ship, we turn on our phones and notice that we have about 50 missed calls from our travel agent, which was odd. When we call her, she sounds super relieved and out of breath. She tells us the flight she originally suggested to us, the one from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur, was shot down over Ukraine. My brain couldn't process that information at the time, but once I woke up the next day it hit me like a ton of bricks. $50 made the difference between seeing the big steel thingy that has so many photos of it and being sent to Sweden in body bags piece by piece. Sometimes the absurdity of my existence comes over me, and this story always gives me goosebumps. One hell of a story to tell over beers, though. I was living in Utah and going to work at 5 in the morning. It was January and there was a fair amount of snow on the road. I was crawling down the icy hill that I lived on that has a traffic light at the bottom. I was about to go through the intersection since it was green for me when I noticed a snow plow that definitely wasn't going to stop at his red light. Luckily I was paying attention and was able to stop before the light. I definitely would have been T-boned if I had kept going. I stayed out of the house overnight while in high school. My dad was pissed off and told me that I better be home that night. I didn't listen and instead stayed at a friend's house with my girlfriend. At around 2 a.m. a kid from high school drove a Denali into my house. It ran directly into my room and destroyed my room, bed and anything else around. He was estimated to be going around 60 miles per hour. My dad is blind and thought that I may have been in the room. He was searching for me frantically, my mother said. I remember getting a ton of phone calls from home knowing that I was going to get into trouble for staying out against my parents' wish. The next day when my GF dropped me off at home, I found a massive wood board and tarp covering my room. I would definitely not be here today if I had stayed home that night. Best case scenario, I'd be a paraplegic. I guess sometimes it does pay to not listen to your parents. I'd planned on doing some grocery shopping one afternoon after running other errands in the morning. By the time I got done with my morning errands, the weather looked quite gloomy, so I decided to leave the groceries for another day. Just as I got home, I got frantic texts from a friend of mine asking if I'm okay and to respond immediately. Apparently around the time I decided last minute to forego shopping, someone opened fire at that exact grocery store I planned on going to. If I remember correctly, fortunately nobody got hurt and the shooter got apprehended quite quickly. Making out with my girlfriend at the time. She was on top of me and leaned in and whispered that she wanted to have sex. I told her I didn't have any condoms and that we'd have to go get some, but she got frustrated and said that we could anyways, but eventually said never mind. Next day I'm at work and she pops in to apologize. I tell her it's not a big deal and that I'll see her after work, only for her to say, no, I shouldn't have put pressure on you and acted like that. I need you to know to have hepatitis C, so we need to be careful. Big bullet dodged. We broke up a couple weeks later after even more shit from her past that she hid came out into the open. Thank you for listening to another B-Town Reddit Stories episode. Hit the subscribe button and check out our channel for more stories. Let us know your opinion about this topic in the comments.